Hello, this is Dr. Hassan Abdullah with the course Deep Reinforcement Learning, and we are at topic number 2, which is machine learning. And that topic is further divided into three subtopics 2A, 2B, and 2C, which basically the difficulty increases progressively from A to C. So we are at topic number 2C. And as before, the video lecture and the contents for this lecture, they have been developed using the personalized learning management system easymcq.com/goget. The personalized learning management system is accessible using the URL which is given in green color on the screen. Now, how to make use of this learning management system, that is shown in 6 videos which are given in a URL in blue color on the screen. So there are many wonderful features in this personalized learning management system which are not there in some of the more popular learning management systems, major learning management systems. So this is all possible because of the feedback which has been given by users like you and incorporated into this personal learning management system. So one of the biggest features and useful features is full text in the content available in the learning management system. So you can type in keywords, short, long, advanced, ensuring the order and so on, and get all the contents which is relevant, which is color coded, and it's available to you. And then, of course, some people may have visual disabilities. So that is not catered in many advanced and major learning management system. So in this easymcq.com, the students or the users have the facility and the ability to change the font type, the font color, the line spacing, and so on, to make it more readable, to make it more interactive and more useful, right? And of course, you can also track your progress. For example, which topics you have covered, which subtopics you have covered, and so on. That is there. And of course, you can evaluate your learning and knowledge accumulation through online exams. You can do multiple of exams, and their aggregate scores are recorded and stored. You can access them, and it also identifies the weaknesses. And of course, the data and the content is presented in a hierarchy which saves the space and so on. So I would urge you to look at those videos. So there are two basically learning approaches. One is the traditional learning approach, which is slides based and which has its own limitations. And then is the Q&A, question and answer based learning approach, which is proactive, which is engaging, which is very adaptable, and which is very thought provoking also. And of course, the traditional approach has a lot of details. So the approach which has been followed is a blended approach or blended learning, that is making the best use of the both approaches. So this is the topic which we are covering, and the topic is machine learning. And this topic is further divided into 15 questions and answers. And these 15 questions and answers are basically concepts. So the concepts which are of higher difficulty level and which are color coded as blue, that is 2C, are covered in this video. And without further ado, we move on to the detailed topics, contents for this lecture. So we are at lecture 2C of the course Deep Reinforcement Learning, and the topic is machine learning. So we look at question number 11. What is semi-supervised learning and its key concepts? Now, semi-supervised learning basically kind of bridges the gap between the supervised learning and unsupervised learning. This is, of course, a machine learning approach. So what it does is that it uses relatively small amount of labeled data, because there is a cost associated with getting lots of labeled data, and then it uses large amount of unlabeled data. Okay, so small amount of labeled data and large amount of unlabeled data, and to train the model more effectively. So before I go through these bullets, let me show you that the diagram which explains this concept. Let's take a look at it. All right. So we have semi-supervised learning, and we have large amount of unlabeled data. Okay, and we have small amount of labeled data also. So we use this, and you have a machine learning model, and we end up with pseudo labeled data set. Pseudo labeled data set has its issues. I will explain them. And using that pseudo labeled data, one can make predictions. and that is going to be either it's going to be, because we have squares and we have rectangles, so either it's going to be a square or a rectangle. Now this model is trained on pseudo label data, okay, and of course and label data also. So what we do in semi-supervised learning, that we have this data which needs to be predicted, classified, and we have this trained machine learning model, and that model has been trained on the pseudo label data and the label data also. So based upon which it classifies, okay, and then a human basically ensures that this classification is correct. So you see that basically we have reduced the complexity of the problem and the cost of the problem also, without more or less without compromising the quality of the results. So what is meant by data combination? I'm talking about this data combination. So as I've already explained, semi-supervised learning combines a small amount of labeled data with a large amount of unlabeled data. Okay, so what it does is that it endeavors to improve the learning efficiency. Okay, and how it does that? Because it is like capitalizing or making use of the unlabeled data, which is small, which is large in volume, and thus it kind of reduces the reliance, okay, on costly, okay, labeled examples, right? That's the thing. And while maintaining the model accuracy, which is like basically ensured by the human intervention at the end. But remember that the work of the human has been reduced significantly. Okay. So then is the label propagation. What is meant by label propagation? So what happens is that in this step, the known labels to unlabeled data, okay, using some kind of a measure that are sent downstream. On that, those measures could be similarity measure, those could be proximity measure, like in nearest neighbor approach, which is called as lazy learning also. So what is the assumption? The assumption is that nearby, if you map them into a certain space, so the items which are nearby, okay, or have similar values, they share the same label. And this allows the model to do what? Extend the limited label information across the data set. And of course, that will improve the generalization. So for example, if we are in a plain geographical area instead of having valleys and hills, so if in a plain, like in a desert, okay, say for example, so the weather is not going to be much different. Say for example, the point which you are standing and 50 miles or 25 miles away from there, as opposed to being in a hilly area where it will maybe at one point you are at a hilltop and the second point you are in a valley, so the weather will be different, right? So that's the assumption over here, label propagation, right? Then is the model confidence. So what happens is that the model assigns pseudo label. Pseudo label is based upon that similarity or the proximity or the neighborhood. Okay, and of course that has certain confidence value, right? So that is a statistical measure. So those predictions which typically have a higher confidence value, okay, they are used for training purposes, right? And why? Because to prevent the issues due to incorrect labels. So it means that there is selectivity uh, and trust involved. And what is the purpose? Is to reduce the error propagation downstream. And of course, when there's a filtering system, that strengthens the reliability of the model. So that is the model confidence. All right. So reduced labeling. So what is meant by reduced labeling? Okay. Reduced labeling basically this semi-supervised approach, semi-super learning approach reduces the need for extensive manual labeling, because most of the work has been done by the models, and then of course the human kind of verifies it. So the overall impact is the costs are lowered, and there is less demand for the resources, human resources, and it is especially useful where the human resources are expensive. For example, in the domain of medicine, healthcare, okay, where label data is scarce or the label data is expensive. So in those areas, in those domains, if there's broader use of machine learning, okay, then there is minimal annotations. because most of the annotation is done by the machine. So what are the real world applications of semi-supervised learning? So they are speech recognition, medical imaging, text classification, and so on. Okay. So what we are doing is building effective models from large unlabeled data sets using small labeled data set verification at the end. So basically, it's a practical solution when the labeled data is limited, and of course, enabling better performance, and of course, with fewer human annotated examples, which results in reduction of the cost and the annotation time also. Okay, so let's move on to the next Q&A or the concept. So what is multimodal learning and its key concepts? So multimodal basically what it basically means is that uh, this type of machine learning uh, learns from data in multiple formats or modality, such as text, such as images, such as audio, such as video, sensory signals, and all of this is done simultaneously. To give you one example, for example, if a person is speaking, okay, and there is some noise or some issue, right? And so there's some issue in the audio or there's some issue in so basically looking at the video and the lip movement and the audio, if the issue in the audio, those issue can be fixed. So that is multimodal. All right. So there are multiple modalities, right? So there, what are those multiple modalities? Multiple modalities, for example, so learning using diverse data types, which I've mentioned, and is done simultaneously. And of course, each of the modality being considered provides unique information. The information which we get from text is different from which we get from images. Not only different, it is unique also, and it is done simultaneously. So what is the end result? That the machine combines, okay, and for better understanding in complex environments for complex cases. And this leads to richer and more accurate predictions than using a single data type alone. But it's not that simple, okay? Which we understand. So let me show you a picture also before we go into more detail, which will make this more understandable. So so if you look at this diagram, so we see that Apple has many modalities, so to say. Of course, all of them are not covered here. So Apple has a taste also, and of course, when you take a bite out of apple, it gives a certain sound. Apple is used to make pie. Apple has different colors, and Apple also has smell, which is not shown here. So all of these are the different modalities which we take into consideration when we are talking of multimodal machine learning. Okay. So these are these are those modalities which I was referring to. So then is the joint representation. So what is meant by joint representation? So basically, there has to be a shared feature space, right? And that is not simple because you need to represent different modalities or present or project them or map them or fuse them together, right, in that feature space. Because until this mapping is done, how can the model understand the relationship between these modalities, right? So this is something which is non-trivial, but once it is done, okay, this enables like image captioning, or this enables audio visual event detection also. Why? Because by tying together these multimodal inputs in a certain type of a framework, so that becomes very powerful. All right. So my apologies. So cross modal learning. So what involves cross modal learning? Basically, knowledge transfer from one modality to another modality to improving the understanding. For example, which I gave before, that visual cues can help. The way the lips are moving to clarify ambiguous speech, and this is like very valuable. And when one modality lacks sufficient label data, okay, that may be the case also. So then what happens that other modalities, okay, they provide the complementary strength, okay, they complement the support across the modalities for improving the performance of the model. So this is kind of a certain application domain. Then is the modality alignment. So what it does is that it ensures that the corresponding information, okay, from different data types is linked together properly, correctly. Which I gave you the example, the speech is matching with the lip movement. So if that alignment is proper, then of course it will enhance the model accuracy, and that will improve the coherence. Okay, when say for example you are doing video transcription, or when the requirement is for emotion recognition. So in that case, okay, these are the certain applications where the synchronization is important. What type of synchronization? Temporal or semantic synchronization. That becomes important. So there's certain domains and there are certain requirements. And finally, the integration has to be robust. So it means that even if some inputs are missing, or even if some inputs are noisy, or even if some inputs are reliable, okay, the robust integration allows the model to work efficiently, effectively. And how it is done by adaptively weighing or maybe ignoring the modalities, okay, based upon the confidence which we have discussed. So it's kind of a so the system has to maintain stable performance, right? And this is especially important for real world scenarios like autonomous driving, okay, or assistive technologies. They are real time applications. So the integration has to be robust. Okay, so we move on to the next type of learning, which is transductive learning. So what is transductive learning? So transductive learning basically it means that the model makes predictions, but only on a specific test instances. And what are those test instances that were available at the time of training? So there is no generalized learning. There is no general function for the which is basically applicable to the unseen future data. So it has a certain scope, okay, and this is more so to say this is more pragmatic approach. So what is meant by the learning scope? Learning scope means that only focus on predicting labels for a specific and for a known set of test instances which were available during the training. So the point is that there may be more instances available, but all of them may not be used or might not be used. So let me first show you the picture or a diagram, and then we'll come back to the bullets. So you see that here we have a conventional supervised learning. So all of the instances have been used for the purpose of for the training purposes. Everything is labeled. Every instance is labeled. This seems to look like support vector machines, and these have been separated. Now this is the transductive learning, and you see that all the instances have not been labeled, right? So and of course they are together, and of course there could be mistake also. Maybe if they were properly labeled, then the orientation of this boundary could have been different depending upon the labels. So they have not been labeled. So this is trans. So these so the white ones, the empty ones are the unlabeled. So let's go back to the bullets. So learning scope. So learning scope that I've discussed with you. So let's move on the label prediction. So what is in label prediction? So in label prediction, okay, the the labels are predicted for obviously unlabeled data, but they were seen during the training, okay, and that makes use of both the labeled and the unlabeled examples. So how the model works? It uses the structure of the test to improve the accuracy, and this is done without learning a general function or which is applicable for the future data, which is the standard prediction, or which is the standard supervised learning approach. Okay, so there is no generalization. There is no generalization. It does not it is this is basically kind of misnomer. This is not absolutely no generalization, but it what it means is that do not generalize beyond the current test set. That is it. So if the test data changes, the model must be retrained. Okay, there's hardly any memory. So, but the benefit is that this limit, which this seems to be a limitation, this helps increase the accuracy, improve the accuracy on the known data. But there is no long-term usability. Why? Because of the all the data is not labeled. All the data is not being used for training. This may kind of sound very strange. So I would suggest that this is the explanation here. Go through the explanation, and there are sufficient number of references here also. So for your benefit. Okay, so model adaptivity. Model adaptivity. So the good thing about this transductive machine learning is that it adapts to the structure and the distribution of the training and the test data. So by taking into consideration all the available instances, okay, uh, the all of them, right? The predictions can be fine tuned. Okay, predictions can be made more accurate, right? When there is limited label data. So this is basically a pragmatic approach, trying to save cost, like we did before also. So what are the application domains? What are the use cases? For example, when there is limited, when the scope is limited. For example, medical diagnostics in the context where the test set is fixed and known beforehand. So basically, we are this these the application domain these it works better for specific data set. Okay, when you are looking for accurate predictions which are general prioritized over generality. Okay, so that's the domain. So let's move on to the next very interesting Q&A. So how deep learning is different to and similar with machine learning, right? Let's go there. So how deep learning is different to and similar with machine learning. Now try to understand that deep learning is a specialized subfield, okay, within the broader domain of machine learning, broader domain of, okay. Now, all deep learning is machine learning, but not all machine learning is deep learning. That I believe you understand. So the key difference between machine learning and deep learning, which I mentioned when I covered the topic of machine learning, was how features are extracted and how model learns to make decisions. So what we are looking at is that the subfield relationship. Subfield relationship. Uh, Deep learning, of course, is a specialized subfield of machine learning. Although deep learning methods are a subset of machine learning, right? Machine learning includes wider range of models. For example, decision trees, support vector machines, linear regression, and they are used. Why? Because of their simplicity and their interpretability. Because in deep learning, when the features are extracted by the deep learning layers of the network, in many cases those features are not comprehensible, understandable by humans because of the way in which those features are extracted that we have discussed in the first topic. So that we kind of look at review it again. Feature extraction, uh, in traditional machine learning humans do the feature extraction. In deep learning this is eliminated. Okay, so the advantage is that deep learning models can handle complex and high dimensional data effectively. So they are different. That's why they are different. Okay, and then are the data requirements. Lots Vast volumes of labeled data is required for deep learning, and of course it makes use of extensive computational resources, which are GPUs or TPUs as a matter of fact, for training. And in contrast, machine learning algorithms can work on like smaller data sets. and they are therefore suitable for those domains where data is limited, or like it is expensive to label. With reference to the model complexity, okay, deep learning has like intricate, complex architectures, millions of parameters, multiple layers. So it makes it very powerful but very difficult to interpret. And when they are difficult to interpret, they are difficult to fine tune. Now, as opposed to deep learning, machine learning models are simple and more transparent, and it greater interpretability. And they are used in certain domains like healthcare and finance also. Why? Because the transparency is crucial. Transparency. Try to understand that if you cannot understand how the parameters were identified in deep learning, so that adds a level of kind of the concept of a black box. And then is the performance scope. Deep learning significantly outperforms traditional machine learning. Okay, and especially for unstructured data such as image classification, speech recognition, natural language processing. Why? Because of the abstract representations. But still, machine learning is there, and it is competitive, right? For certain types of just like tabular data sets, okay, unlike the image data set, which is highly unstructured. And of course, when we are interested in model explainability and efficiency. So let me show you a diagram, okay, which ties these things together, right? You should be reading all of this. So we have artificial intelligence, right? Which encompasses many things, right? And knowledge representation and reasoning also is not mentioned here. So I teach, yeah, reasoning is here. So I teach this course as a matter of fact, and this course is available on easymcq.com/goget. And then that subset of artificial intelligence is machine learning. So we have support vector machines, we have k nearest neighbor, decision trees, random forest, we have hierarchical clustering, which is not mentioned here. I also teach this course. This course is, I believe, also available on this web portal. And neural networks is a type of machine learning. Okay. And when you have like hundreds and thousands of those layers of the neuron layers, okay, and you have convolution neural networks, okay, and you have recurrent neural networks, so that's the domain of deep learning. So that is how all these things are tied together. Okay, finally, we move on to the last question of this topic. Okay, this topic of machine learning. So there is a kind of a misnomer now, basically, which is in unsupervised learning. Now, people kind of mix together clustering with cluster extraction. So I think that you should know about it. The difference between clustering, which is a more complex task, as compared to cluster extraction, which is also a complex task, but it is relatively simpler as compared to clustering. So, in a nutshell, what happens is that in clustering, the objective is to explore and look for hidden patterns, okay, in the data structure, or try to understand for further analysis. Now, so the objective is discovery, right? In clustering, the objective is discovery. In cluster extraction, is more about producing the clusters or finding the actionable groups. That's it. So, what are the main things here? Clustering, the purpose, or the important. So, what is the purpose of clustering? To explore and understand the data, the structure of the data, and that is used in future analysis. Now, cluster extraction, like in K means, directly partitions the data for specific tasks. So, basically, we are looking at this. Okay, and so this is like discovery versus grouping that we've already discussed. Okay, then the structure of the output. Okay, let me first, what I'll do is I will show you some a diagram. Okay, and then this should become very simple to understand. All right. So now try to understand that this black, okay, this is a two-dimensional space in which data is present, and of course, depending upon the size of this data set, this you may not be able to display the contents of the space on a computer screen. or it could be two-dimensional, it could be multi-dimensional, three or four, whatever. So what cluster extraction does is that it finds those groupings which are there and they are significant. So this is a significant cluster, so that has been identified by this red boundary. This is not a significant cluster, but still it was got clustered because of some of the issues. And this is basically a certain clustering technique. I would not like to name that technique. This is basically this cluster extraction is showing the limitation of that technique. Now, try to understand. This is cluster extraction. Now, if we automatically rearrange these black and white dots, if we automatically rearrange them, then this is clustering. We get these two clusters. So this is an array. In simplicity, this is an array, and those are the data structure or the array representation is identical for them. But this has been rearranged automatically. So this takes out the cluster C1 and C2. So this is clustering, grouping, and cluster extraction. This red boundary takes them out. So you see that there's no comparison between cluster extraction, which is at the very small at the low end, and the first the clustering and then the cluster extraction. This is way ahead. So this is basically my PhD work. I have developed these techniques. Okay. Now let's go back to those bullet points. So now you understand that what is meant by output structure, what is cluster formation. So something which is important is the interpretability. Okay. So when we do the clustering, the grouping, and the changing of the rows and columns, right? So that makes it very easy to interpret the relationships. But cluster extraction is less interpretable, but it's very precise because the clusters are extracted, right? And of course, this is good for computational processing or machine learning. And finally is the use case context. So in the context of use case, clustering is suitable for exploratory work, okay, like gene expression analysis or behavioral studies or finding hidden patterns, while cluster extraction is used for applications like finding customer segmentation or anomaly detection. So customer, when we say customer segmentation, then we have a scenario where we cannot change the order of the rows and columns. Okay, say for example, we have a table in which the columns are the times at which the items were purchased, right? And maybe the rows are so you cannot change the order of the columns, right? And the rows are the transaction IDs. That this is the transaction ID, and they are also sequential. So now we are looking at the pattern. So that is the domain of cluster extraction and so on. So that's all I have for this topic, which is topic number uh, 2C. Thank you very much.